Alright, so inshallah we can go ahead and get started.
That over. And boom. Move this image up. Alright, cool.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome everyone to our Sunday lecture. I want to start off by sending blessings upon our beloved Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we'll say the dua that we generally say in our salah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. I want to thank everyone again for coming out today, Sunday. And the topic for tonight, well, before I give you the topic for tonight, I want to make a special dua for everyone who was affected by the recent bombing in London. You know that with every death and every loss of life, it's a tragedy. So we want to pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends His blessings upon the Ummah, sends His blessings upon the world so that we can find some level of balance in the near future. Ameen. Also make dua for the victims of the Portland attack. And victims who are suffering all around the world, right? Because we see a lot of it happening. So we pray that Allah restores the lives of those who have been affected by these different tragedies, those who are still alive, and that He shows mercy upon those who are still around to find the best way to deal and to support those who have been affected by these various tragedies and calamities. Ameen, ameen, ameen. So I want to start with two stories. Today. Imagine it's early Saturday morning and you are driving, heading to Walmart. And pick the Walmart that you don't like to go to, the one in Delaware Ave, right? That one where you just don't want to go there, right? And think of, you're there, you've done your shopping, you've done everything that you need to do, and then you are on your way. And you're not alone, right? You're with somebody who's very dear to you. And in the middle of the journey, you get into a dispute, an argument. And somewhere along the way, you find yourself getting so frustrated that you decide to get out of the vehicle somewhere around Community College of Philadelphia. And then you proceed to find yourself walking down Lancaster Avenue, thinking about the topic that you're going to deliver for the lecture today. So that's the first story. The second story I want to share with you, it's about me, right? That was about me. The second story that I want to share with you, and I made it all the way down to Cuba, right? It was actually pretty cool. It was, you clear your mind with a nice walk like that at 12 o'clock in the day. The second story I want to share with you, there was this woman, she lived during the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Her name was Hind, and there's another name that she goes by, but I'll leave that for the end. Her husband was Abdullah ibn Abdul Asad, and they were some of the early ones to actually convert to Islam. So they were within the first, let's say, the first 25 to 50 Muslims to convert during the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were of those who made the first hijrah to Abyssinia. Now I want you to think of Hind, right? May Allah be pleased with her. When she left to go to Abyssinia with her husband, she had a very big, spacious house. She came from a tribe that was respected. So she left wealth, she left property to make this migration to Abyssinia. While in Abyssinia, of course, their hearts longed for Mecca, right? Because Mecca is their home. Mecca is where the rest of her family was. So she longed to go back to Mecca, and then when they got back to Mecca, this was after about 2 years in Abyssinia. When they got back to Mecca, of course, we know of the persecution that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his companions faced. And if we remember the hijrah to Medina, the hijrah to Medina wasn't all of the Muslims got up all at once and just left en masse to go to Medina, right? Many times when we think of the hijrah to Medina, that's how we think of it, right? Like all of the Muslims got up one day, we're out of here, and no, it was actually a trickle out thing, right? Muslims would go in small contingents, sometimes 2 by 2, sometimes a slightly larger group. So a number of Muslims had migrated to Medina even before the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ left. So Hind and her husband were of the first to try to make this trip to Medina. Now on her way out of Mecca, it was her husband and her young son. On her way out of Mecca, the members of her tribe came and said to the husband, "We have more right to her than you do. She is not going anywhere with you." So they separated Hind, her son, and her son from her husband. And then the husband's tribe looked at Hind and said, "That boy that you have there, he's ours. He's from our lineage. You're not keeping him, so we have more rights to him." So now you have Hind going with her tribe, you have the son going with the father's tribe, and then you have the father making the hijrah to Medina. So of course any mother who's separated from her son and her husband feels the trauma of that. So after about a year, there's someone who sees her and decides to go to the chieftains of her tribe to plead for her to be allowed to be reunited with her husband. So they make the plea, and the tribe eventually says, "You know what, okay, fine, you can go." But in her mind, she's like, "How can I leave my son here in Mecca?" She implores some others to go and plead with the husband to allow her son to Medina. So they make the plea, and eventually they allow the son to go with his mother to Medina. When she got to Medina, on her way to Medina actually, she met this non-Muslim. And he was actually the custodian of the Kaaba. Or for a while he was the custodian of the Kaaba. And when he saw her walking alone with her son, he's like, "Where are you going?" And she says, "I'm going to meet my husband who's in Medina." So he then takes the rein of the camel that she's on and leads her all the way. Anytime she needed to stop, he would make the camel sit, she would get off. He would go to another tree, sit down, let her get her rest, whatever it is, nourish herself. But he continued with her all the way to the outskirts of the village of Medina. And then when he got there, he said, your husband is inside of this village, and then he left her and he went back to Mecca. Does anyone know, before I continue with the last two parts of this story, does anyone know who this person is? Nobody from my group. Does anyone know who this person is? Does anyone know the name of this sister during the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Anyone? I'll give you a hint. No, if I give you that, you'll get it. Any guesses? Alright, so I'll give you this. She later became one of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of the older wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yes, this was Salama. So her husband, and I'll finish this part of the story here, right? In Medina, her husband was wounded in the Battle of Uhud, and the wounds never really healed, and he was bedridden for a time after that. And one day, he narrated a saying of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ while she was nursing his wounds, where the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said that anyone who is faced with a calamity and says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim, inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un," and then follows that up by saying, "Allahumma urjurni fi musibati wa ukhlif li khayran minha," "O Allah, reward me for my loss and give me that which is better than it." Anyone who says that, at the end of it, Allah eases their burden and replaces it with something better and more significant. Brothers and sisters, I want to start with these two stories because I want to discuss this idea of patience and what it means to see it through until the end. Seeing it through means that we will have some challenge, we'll have some difficulty, but by the end of it, what are you doing? You're sticking with it. So I have a riddle for you. So I want you to think about this and then maybe turn to the person next to you, see if you come up with an answer, and then we'll see what answers you come up with. What is that thing that Ramadan shows each of us that is the same for each of us, but is different for each of us? What is that thing that Ramadan shows each of us that is the same for each of us, but is different for each of us? I'll give you a few seconds, a minute or so, no more than a minute, to discuss this with somebody next to you and see what you come up with. What is that thing that Ramadan shows each of us is the same for each of us, but is also different for each of us? All right. If you think you have a response, just raise your hand. If you think you have a response, raise your hand. All right, I have a couple. All right. Sister Aisha, what do you have?
Hunger.
Hunger, all right. That definitely counts. Mickey.
The shaitan in us. The shaitan in us.
The shaitan in us?
Because we can't say that our bad deeds are from shaitan. Because he's locked up.
Hold that for me. Sister Fatima.
Mo and I was saying similar, like your personal struggle, like your natural struggle.
Yeah. The answer that I came up with to this riddle was you. So the shaitan in you, right? Or your nafs, right? So why is it the same for all of us? All of us have something that we're struggling with. All of us have something that we have to struggle with during this month of Ramadan. So we all have a difficulty that we're going to navigate. But that difficulty that we're going to navigate is going to be different for each and every single one of us in some way, shape, or form. And one thing is true is that Ramadan shows us who we are. The one thing that we all get out of Ramadan is a clear picture of who we are. Whether you decide to fast or not, whether you decide to give charity or whatever, at the end of this month, you know, if you're paying attention, who you are. So that riddle is copyrighted, right? I thought of that today. I'm locking it down. So this lecture, brothers and sisters, is entitled Seeing It Through, that thing called patience. So I want us to look at patience from a more balanced or nuanced perspective. So we'll cover the general definition and everything else, but I also want us to discuss what it means to persevere and see things through. And from the onset, we have to set the expectation that patience is a requirement for success. And why do we say that? If we make the argument that there is no success without struggle, then we have to understand that there is no struggle without patience. Patience is a requirement for success. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in His glorious Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون. So remember me and I shall remember you. Be grateful unto me and do not be ungrateful or do not deny me. The interesting thing here is that what immediately follows this verse is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. O you have attained to faith, O you say you believe, seek help with consistent or steadfast perseverance and prayer, for Allah is with those who persevere or who push forward in adversity. The interesting thing about these two verses is that patience is connected to gratitude, right? Because Allah says that to show gratitude unto Him or be grateful to Him and do not deny Him. And then He continues by saying one of the ways in which to do that is to do what? To have patience in adversity. So Allah connects patience to gratitude. But let's go even further back to see how Allah got us to this point. When we read the verses, even before these two verses that I mentioned, it's like a whole story that Allah is narrating to us, right? In the verses leading up to this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the changing of the Qibla for the Prophet Muhammad and the companions, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He talks about the new direction being a mercy or an ease on the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He speaks about those who came before the Muslims who hid the truth, even though they knew that the truth that was revealed in the Quran was the truth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he speaks about all of that. He speaks about how Muslims should turn to the Kaaba when they are facing or when they are ready to pray. And then he also speaks about how he continues to bless those who worship him. Then he says that he sent the messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the people to purify them and to teach them what they did not know. But he doesn't stop there. And then he gives these two verses that I just mentioned. But he doesn't stop there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after these two verses, a bit later on, he goes on to mention the things that we need to have patience in. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? He reminds us of these things, and these are the things to which we are attached, right? The things that really make us feel like we are something, or make us feel connected to something that we have a connection to. So the things that Allah lists that we need to be wary of having patience with or having patience in, one of the things he mentions is al-khawf, or fear. Right? Al-khawf, or fear. Al-ju'i, or hunger. Al-ju', or hunger. That we need to be patient in hunger. وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ, the loss or the reduction in our wealth. وَثَمَرَاتٍ, the loss of the fruits of our labor, of our trade. And then after Allah lists all of these things that we need to have patience with, he then wraps up this whole section with some encouragement. وَبَشِّرْ الصَّابِرِينَ, and give glad tidings to who? Those who are patient. This here alone, brothers and sisters, gives clear insight into the fact that for us to have patience, we have to experience challenge and loss. For us to have patience, we have to experience some sort of struggle, some sort of challenge, and some sort of loss. We don't need to have patience when everything is going right. We don't need patience then. What we need there is gratitude. And there's a saying of the Prophet ﷺ that I'll touch on in a second. We need patience when we are struggling, right, Brother Vernon?
Yeah.
That's why we need patience. We need patience when that struggle is real. We need patience when we are jammed up and hemmed up and we are feeling to quit. That's when patience becomes key. And Ramadan brings this out for each one of us in many ways. I know that it brought it out for me very clearly yesterday in that sun. It was quite clear. And I, for one, and I think many of us, we feel miserably in this. Right? Because I don't think there's any of us who set a goal for this Ramadan that we have met 100%. And if you've set a goal for this Ramadan that you've met 100%, please raise your hand so we can all come and touch you and feel your nur and get some of that barakat, because we all need it, right? That you've set a goal and you know that you're 100%. Let's put your hands down. And you know that you're 100% on point. So what does, these guys are funny. So what does sabr mean? When you hear sabr, and you can just blurt this out. When you hear sabr, when you hear sabr, what do you think it means? What does it mean to you?
Patience.
Patience. All right, what else?
Good steadfastness.
Steadfastness. Good. What else?
Patience when you have no patience.
Patience when you have no patience. Good. What else?
Cooling your temper.
Cooling your temper. Thank you, Amal. What else?
Work.
Balance. Good.
Work.
Work. Good. What else? Nothing? All right. Anyone else? I'll take two more. Compromise? Time. Good. So some of the other things that we that come out of this word sabr, right, or from the root, to conserve, to make durable, to engage in self-control, to show some level of self-restraint, to have endurance, to comfort, and to provide comfort. To hold one's own against an attack or to defend yourself. All of these things come out of this idea of sabr. So one of the things that I want to say is that although we have actions that we need to engage in to demonstrate sabr, more than anything else, sabr is about what? Attitude. Sabr is about attitude. It is an issue of our attitude. You guys need a break? The outcome of whatever we're going through doesn't necessarily change, right? That has already been written with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? The qadr doesn't change. And although we know that the dua that we make can direct things in a particular direction, the outcome is already written. The blessings or the reward that we get out of that outcome is what we help determine in some way, shape, or form. Whether we accept the outcome or not, the end result and what we get out of it, we have a role to play in that. The noble companion and family member of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ali radiallahu anhu, is reported to have said that sabr or patience is the iman. That sabr is the iman. What the head is to the body. That patience is the faith. What the head is to the body. When the head is cut off, the body dies. So when patience is cut off from us, what happens? Our iman, our faith dies. Verily, there is no faith for he who has no patience. We could stop right here and this would be sufficient for us to dwell on, right? There is no faith for people who have no patience. How many of us would say that, like, or you have said in the past, you know what? I am a patient person. How many of us have said that to someone in the, you know what? I wouldn't even ask you guys to confess to that. Think to yourself, how many of you have said in the past to someone, I am a patient person, or I have patience? I want us, by the end of this discussion, to see if that is something that we want to continue saying. Right? If we want to continue saying that, hey, you know what? I am somebody who is patient. I am someone who has patience. Because as I ask you that question, think of the thing that you've told that person that you had patience with. Think of it if at any point in time you have shown any impatience in that same thing. And if you've shown impatience in that thing, then can you still make that claim that you have patience? Or have you just negated it? If we are claiming patience, we are claiming something absolute. And that can be very problematic for us to hold on to. And you'll see why by the end of this, inshallah. Boys, you all are disturbing me. So what does it mean to seek help? With patience. This right here means to see it through. Allah is telling us that in even seeking help, we have to be patient. We have to have self-control. We have to be steadfast. We have to make ourselves durable. We have to conserve and preserve. We have to defend. We have to comfort, and we have to provide safety. Shukran. And we have to do all of these things while we are seeking help. So here in this month of Ramadan, we are asking Allah for help. But while we are asking Him for help, we are still doing all of these things. Right? We are preserving, we are conserving, we are defending, we are sharing, we are protecting, we are exerting effort, we are doing all of these things while they're saying, oh Allah, help us. And the fact of this is situated in the idea that Allah reminds us of the purpose of the fast, right? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله. No, the verse on fasting. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Right? So this idea of fasting, right, is to help us develop taqwa. Question: is patience or God consciousness? Is patience a part of taqwa? Is patience a part of our God consciousness? Yes, it is, right? Is perseverance a part of our God consciousness? Is forgiveness? Is protection? Is giving to the ones who are in need? All of these things are part of our God consciousness. So all of these things are part of our fast. All of these things are things that we're going to have to work on or develop during our fast. So we've just finished the first week of the month of Ramadan. Alhamdulillah, many of the Muslims started the fast on the same day, right? Every year we have this argument about when are we starting the fast. So Alhamdulillah, most of the Muslims started fasting on that Saturday. So we would tell ourselves, Allah has blessed us, we don't have anything to argue about, we are safe, we are good. So we didn't have to argue about the start of the day of the month of fasting. But guess what we found to argue about? The actual start of the time of the fast. You missed it. Oh, you missed that whole conversation. It went on for about 4 or 5 days. About the true dawn and the false dawn. The true start of the fast and the false start of the fast. So we didn't have to worry about the start of the month. So what did we decide to argue about? The actual start of the day of fasting itself. What time do we stop eating? To the point that someone emailed me, when do you stop eating? But this is somebody who really wanted to know, right? But this just to say just how serious this thing got that we started asking people something that we've been doing for many years. Wait, just now, have I been doing this thing wrong my entire life? the reality of this is, it is good that when we find new information, we seek confirmation. Not knocking that at all. This is important. But the fact that this is resurfacing now is problematic, to the point that a whole bunch of us are wondering, is my fast valid? Is the way the light should be shown, is it the vertical light in the sky or the horizontal light? Which light is the light that I use to stop fasting? This went on for 4 or 5 days. And then it died down, and alhamdulillah, we were good, right? And then you heard the story of the Jamal and the Brahm. I'm sorry. The camel and the prom.
Oh, yeah.
I tried it. I tried it.
Dubai problem?
It fell flat. Yeah. Anyway.
Take a deep breath.
So, why do I mention this? You know, we all have feelings around it, but I want to mention it in the context of patience. You know, so I'm leaving the rest of the conversation around it. We all have our own opinions and feelings about it, and we can continue to argue that in our own spaces. But the conversation I want to have around this, I want to borrow it from something a brother, Akil Fahad, said. You know, because there was a cake that was formed like the Quran, and there were other things in this whole production that people took that challenged some individuals.
But the cake had a little man with it, right?
That was a separate cake shake. It was 2 cakes. But this is what Brother Akil Fahad said. He said, the prom has people, many Philly people, upset. Yet wouldn't it be a great teaching moment and a good gesture for this Ramadan for a group of Muslims to reach out to the family and express empathy for what they have gone through, and then also use this as a moment of dawah, right? Of saying, hey, you know what? This is why some individuals may have been challenged by this. Because many of us saw the end product, but we didn't see what led up to that, right? What led up to that? And you're like, how can we show empathy? So let's now add some context to this story. Her husband died. The son who she was holding this prom getaway send-off for was shot. His younger brother was shot. She had cancer. She was in hospital. And while she thought she was about to die, she said, I am going to send my son to Dubai if, God, you take me out of this calamity. And when she recovered from the calamity, she said, you know what? I'm not sending you there yet. I'll bring it to you. So she went through this whole production to turn part of North Philly into mini Dubai for her son. It costs a lot of money, right? And for 2 or 3 years or so, every day or every week or something like that, the story said, she would put a couple $100 in this jar she would use to save up for this. We see the end result, and the end result, we can continue to have issues with it and be bothered by it. We can. And that's not take anything away from how we feel about it. We can, right? And to a certain extent, we should. But let's not lose the context of how we got here. Look at the patience and perseverance she had to go through to get to this point. As challenging as the end result was, how many of us have said we are going to save and we haven't been able to save? How many of us have said we are going to do this for our kids and we haven't done it? How many of us have made an oath to Allah, oh Allah, if you take me out of this calamity, I am going to do this, and we never fulfilled it. And we are the ones who have the guidance. And here you have someone, who we say doesn't have guidance, and they're exuding patience and perseverance to deliver on an oath that they made with God. Context changes things, doesn't it? Context, it doesn't necessarily change the outcome, but it might change how we feel about things. Ramadan, brothers and sisters, is an excellent month in which to start exerting and pushing ourselves further. Because our knee-jerk reaction to stuff like this is very telling of who we are, right? What she did is her thing. Our response to it is us. Those who went out and started cursing and stuff, that's us. That is not that. And Ramadan shows us that. So when we say, how the whatever, can somebody do this to desecrate Islam in the month of Ramadan, and we go all out, and we lay them out, because they have done something in Ramadan, what about us? And we in greater violation, we know they are not fasting. And we in greater violation because we are the ones who are fasting. We are the ones who are striving to develop taqwa. Ramadan shows us who we are. Without a doubt. As an individual, it shows us who we are. And I speak for myself first. If Ramadan is not softening my heart, if it's not softening our hearts, then what is Ramadan doing? Because if taqwa or God consciousness is supposed to soften our hearts, and the purpose of Ramadan is to develop taqwa, and our hearts are not being softened in Ramadan, then what are we doing? What am I doing? If a small argument can force me in my own mind to decide to walk, what is Ramadan doing for me? So I'll use my example. We all have our own examples, yeah? We all have our own, right, Sister Muslima? We all have our own examples of our struggles. So what does this mean, brothers and sisters? There are things that will ask you to persevere. There are things that will ask you to hold your tongue, Jarrell. There are things that will say, you know what? I'm going to see if you're willing to hold your tongue. And it will push you and push you and push you until you're like, no, I can't hold my tongue anymore. There are things that will ask us to submit. I need you to do this. What? No, I need, as your imam, I need you to do this. Why? I just need you to do it. Nah, you need to give me something more than that. There are things that will ask us to push ourselves. There are things that will ask us to support each other. This is Ramadan, right? This is taqwa. So if Ramadan isn't doing these things for us, if these things aren't coming to us, then we aren't going to develop taqwa in this month. So I'll say two things. By the end of this discussion, brothers and sisters, after I have laid out why Ramadan or patience involves effort, I want to leave you with two things in the end. I want to discuss what prevents Go ahead, what's that?
Yeah, this is our hot.
Oh, is there one on top there? Yeah. Cool. And you can turn on the fans, please. The patience is blocked or prevented by two things I'll argue today. Many things, but there are two things I'll highlight today. Patience is prevented by pride and hopelessness or despair, and patience is aided or helped by hope and humility. Pride and despair block patience. Hope and humility bring patience. If Ramadan is a struggle to attain and maintain consciousness of Allah, then we have to amp up our efforts to be hopeful and humble, and we have to fight against the tendencies to be proud and hopeless. So there are two broad categories in our lives where we find patience emerging, right? Patience in our personal life, managing our emotions, holding back, remaining calm, maintaining your cool, having restraint, waiting to see something despite the fact that you want to jump on it and pounce on it. You want to badge and you want to respond. You want to do something in the situations out of the heat in the moment. Pressure, anxiety, curiosity, anger, confrontation, all of these things are personal things that we deal with or that require patience. But the thing that we need to manage in all of these is our pride. In all of these, in every single case I just mentioned, is our pride. And when we don't manage our pride from the onset, our patience fades away. So the minute he says something to you, and you lash out, our patience has faded away. You might ask, but what if somebody says something and I respond, but I don't go full blast on them, and then I cool down? Isn't that patience?
Yeah.
It's patience, right? Yeah, it is. It's patience like a car with 3 wheels, right? Or 2 wheels, right? But it's patience. It's a version of patience. But we'll see what patience is according to the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in about 5 minutes. So I want you to hold on to that. Because some of us, we say, well, yeah, I don't go full blast and then I cool down, and that is me exercising patience and restraint. So we want to see what the Prophet ﷺ says is real patience. Then, in this same first category, we battle with, apart from our own personal struggles, we battle with natural hardships, right? Illnesses, diseases, death of loved ones, natural calamities, disasters, problems or setbacks, all of these things emanating from situations and circumstances that we have no control over. All of these things require a certain amount of patience to navigate it. And what these things require? Hope. Hope that after your house is destroyed by a hurricane, Allah will set right your affairs. Hope that after a natural calamity hits a space, that Allah will set right the affairs. So the first category is this general definition of patience that we have, right? Where we have to deal with our personal struggles and calamities. The second category I want to highlight is what we would want to call perseverance. Because there's that patience that is a restraint, and then there's that patience or sabr. The other part of sabr is the thing that causes us to push through when there's nothing else that we can do. So before I get to the second one, I want to provide some context for the first. In this first category, where it's a natural calamity or our personal struggles, some of this is under our control. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is reported to have said, the strong one is not the one who overcomes people by strength, and we have all heard this, but is the one who is able to do what? Controls himself while he's angry. A Muslim doesn't suffer from any mental or physical anguish or any distress, grief, pain, or sorrow, even from the pricking of a thorn, except what? Except that Allah forgives him some of his sins. So there's no distress that the Muslim faces except that Allah forgives him his sins. But what is required for that to happen? What is required for that to happen? If we get pricked with a thorn, or if there's some distress that we feel, if somebody upsets me, and then I turn around and I start slapping that person, I don't get my sins forgiven because I felt some distress. I get my sins forgiven because I responded to that calamity with patience. I don't get the reward. This is not a catch-all thing, right? I don't get the reward simply because I get some difficulty. I get the reward if I get the difficulty and I respond appropriately. Just the presence of the reward doesn't simply give me, just the presence of the difficulty doesn't simply give me the reward. In another narration, it's said that the Prophet Muhammad, when speaking to some of the members of the Ansar, he said, whoever practices sabr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him sabr. And no one can be given anything better in this life than what? Sabr. So sabr, or patience, is the best gift that we can be given. In another situation, and I want you to think of this, right? Your son or daughter does something that is very upsetting. You shout at the child, but you do not hit them. And you're like, Khalif, you know what? I'm being very patient with you right now. But if you continue to push my buttons, you will see something else. I'm being very patient with you right now. But boy, how many of us have said that? We have, right? Yeah, I'm being patient with you, and our face is all like frowned up, our teeth, we're gritting our teeth, our voice, and this, and guess what the funny thing is? This is our demonstration of patience. This is us being patient, right? So we don't necessarily hit them. You grab them. I'm not going to hit you right now, but look at me, I'm being patient. Your spouse does something. I'm going to be patient with you on this. But each time something happens that reminds you of this, remember I told you I was going to be patient with this with you, right? Okay. Remember I told you I'm being paid. Okay. Just remember I told you. Sister Mina, can you just give me just a few more minutes? Shukran. Just remember, I told you about this. I told you not to do this, and here you are doing it again. But I won't say anything to you. I'll be patient, because that's what I told you I'll be. So, our version of patience tends to look a lot less like patience, even though we are calling it patience, right? So is this patience? This kind of patience is the lowest level of patience, right? The first things I mentioned. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ is reported to have said, when he told a woman crying, and we find this when we look in some of the books of Hadith, we see this particularly in the books of how you perform the janazah. And a woman was crying over the grave of her husband, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, have taqwa and be patient. In another narration of this, later on the Prophet Muhammad is reported to have said, as-sabru inda Aswaramati al-ula. Patience is what? Patience is at the first sign of the calamity. Patience is at the first sign of the difficulty. So, going back to our scenarios, your child offends you. You grip them up and you tell them you're being patient. According to this, nah, we're not. Because the first sign of the calamity or the struggle was that child testing you. Your patience, part of it, yes, is in maintaining yourself later on. But that is not real patience. Real patience is facing that and dealing with it right there. Controlling your temper, because even though you aren't hitting the child, you're still demonstrating a certain level of anger, right? You're still demonstrating a certain level of frustration. That there isn't patience as we want to define it. You are engaging in some self-restraint by not going further. But when we call ourselves patient, that isn't it. Patience isn't being harsh with someone, but not using foul language. I could really go off on you right now, but I won't. I'll just tell you about yourself. And I'll tell you about yourself in a way to make you cry. So understand, I'm being patient with you right now. Patience, brothers and sisters, is not necessarily how we define it. It's how the Prophet Muhammad defines it. And one of the ways in which he defines it is when we are first hit with calamity, that we find the resolve to restrain ourselves and to hold ourselves accountable for our actions that follow. When we think of what patience brings to us, and you have heard me and you have heard maybe other imams say this over and over, right? And this is one of my favorite narrations of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he said that truly wondrous is what? Is the life or the affairs of the believer, right? Why? Because if there's a calamity, he's patient, and there are blessings in that. And if he's blessed, or if he has ease, he's grateful, and there are blessings in that. So no matter how we slice it, we good. But it depends on how we respond to it. We can be good on either side, but it all depends on how we react to it. So the second category, as I start wrapping this up, deals with forbearance. And this is the one that tends to be a bit more difficult for many of us, right? This is when something is being done to you and you have no control over it. And you just have to bear it. You just have to bear it. What do I mean? Think of a child who is in an abusive home. Think of a woman who is brought from a foreign country, passport taken, she's locked up, and she's in an abusive relationship, if we want to call it. Well, using the term relationship very generically. Think of a wife who was not brought from a different country, who doesn't speak English as a second language, but who is American, who is educated, who lives in a home with a husband who is so overly bearing that she's not seeing her way out of the situation. Because we like to use the very extreme examples, right? When we're having some, right here. Think of the 485 or so civilians who were killed in the past 2 years because of what is happening in Syria. And think of the survivors who have no idea when the next bullet will pierce their lungs or the next bomb will be dropped on them. Or when members of the government or of the group that is engaging in complete terror comes to their homes and says, you get out, it's time to die. This is forbearance. And this narration about if you're in a space where you're being oppressed and stuff like that, then make hijrah. It's not going to cut it as a catch-all excuse for this. Because we have to be honest that there are people who are in conditions from which you cannot escape, and the only solution they have is forbearance. This is a different level of patience. So I brought you some contemporary examples. If I just mentioned the story of Bilal ibn Rabah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with him. And when he had the stone being placed on his chest, we can all connect with that, right? We all hear that many times. Forbearance. Patience. The interesting thing is that Allah tells us in Ashura that if something wrong is done to us, do we have the right to pay it back in the same level? We do. Something is wrong is done to you, you have the right to return it. You have the right to defend yourself. But then he goes on to caution us because he's Allah, right? He says, up to a certain point, don't transgress the limits, and pay attention to the fact that when you're trying to exact your rights, it's easy to transgress the limits. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولمن الصبر وغفر إن ذلك لمن عزم الأمور. But verily, or pay attention, if one is patient in adversity and you forgive, then guess what? This is indeed that thing to set your heart or your hopes upon. If you're in adversity and you forgive, this is after Allah tells us, hey, somebody does something wrong to you, it's okay. You're within your right to get your just deserts from them, to get your just due from them. But if you forgive and you have patience, that is closer to piety. That is closer to this taqwa that I started off speaking about. So let's look to start wrapping this up, brothers and sisters. There's balance in our Islam, and this is our balance. There's a place in our Islam for the ones who are injured and harmed to exact justice. There's a place for that. Without question, Allah sanctions that. He sanctifies that. There's a place in our Islam for those who are harmed, who say, you know what? I'm just going to forgive you. And I'm going to just be patient with this. And even that, there are two levels, right? There's that forgiveness where I'm asking Allah to not even hold you accountable for this. And then there's that patience that says, I'm not going to do anything. I'll let Allah deal with this. So there's a space in Islam for all of these folks. The ones who want their justice now. The ones who says, I'm not going to take any justice now. I'm going to let Allah deal with you. And the one who says, I forgive you, and I'm going to pray that Allah forgives you. And I hope you don't have to answer for this on the Day of Judgment. So there's a space in Islam for all of them. But there's no space in Islam for who? There is no space in Islam for the one who goes beyond the limits. There is no space in Islam for the one who transgresses bounds without care or concern. There is no space in Islam for the one who does things with malicious intent and has no remorse for that. So this Ramadan, brothers and sisters, or sometime thereafter, you may find out that there's a religious leader or someone you care about who is not as shiny as you thought they were. Their shine diminishes and fades. In this Ramadan, or shortly thereafter, you might be disappointed by someone. You might be misled with an untruth. You might be ignored even though your position gives you the right to be heard. You might lose something that you worked for. You might not get something for which you were striving. You might get told about yourself harshly, or you might get told about yourself gently. All of these things are things we may experience in this Ramadan, or things we may experience after this Ramadan. In each of these things, we need patience. In each of these, we need patience. Because if we don't have patience, we are going to lose the blessings of this month and of our existence thereafter. I'll end off with two things. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والله يحب الصابرين. And Allah loves those who what? Who are patient. This is a reward for patience. It's not just because it's something good to do. All of that is important. But this phrase right here is sufficient. Allah loves those who are patient. If that is not sufficient for us, if the love of Allah is not sufficient enough for us to strive with our utmost for this quality, then what is? Because everything else that I've mentioned in the past hour is to lead towards this, right? This love of Allah. Because if that's not what we are striving for, then we aren't striving for anything. Paradise is the reward of the believers. In His Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises the believers Al-Jannah for their patience. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us that patience, in some narrations, is part of our faith, half of our faith, or is Iman. Right? That patience is either half of our faith or is our entire faith. And I already mentioned this notion that patience is the best gift that we can be given in this life. So when patience is missing, brothers and sisters, ingratitude develops. Ingratitude is a logical follow-up to impatience. Think of losing a loved one, and we focus on death to the point that anytime death is mentioned, we forget that Allah still has given us life, and He has given life to many around us in a way that we can still acknowledge that. Right? But when it's mentioned, it is as though this is the only thing that we need to focus on, that there's nothing else around us to focus on. This is something that the canoe does, right? That the person who is ungrateful does. And this is something that Shaitan causes us to do. He causes us to focus only on the bad to the point that we think that our life only has bad in it. And he causes us to ignore the good to the point that we think that our life has very little or no good in it. A logical extension of the persistent absence of patience is ingratitude. So how do we spend more time developing our patience? Spend more time being grateful, however you define that. However you define gratitude in your life, spend some time doing that. However it is. And there are many ways we can define gratitude. Exercise restraint when faced with a loss or a test. And stop making excuses for ourselves. A famous excuse is, this is how I am. Take it or leave it. If you love me, you will take me as I am. No, I will not. I love you, I think, no? Why? Why should it be that the engagement damages me and is problematic to me, and that's how I should take you as a sign of love? Should I have patience in navigating it? Absolutely. But should your excuse be, you need to be patient with me? No. Patience should not be asked for by the one who is transgressing. If you are transgressing, you don't ask the person to be patient with you. I'm beating you up, you need to be patient with me until I'm able to stop beating you up. No, be patient with me, I'm going to stop beating you up soon. Just be patient with me. What? If you are wronging me, you don't have the right to ask me to be patient with you. Allah has a right to encourage me to be patient, not you. You're right. What you have to do is to ask for forgiveness. What I have to do is to ask for forgiveness. But many of us, we are doing the wrong thing. We are called at it and we said, but I thought you were going to be patient with me. No, you don't ask for patience. If we have something to fix, we fix it. We don't make excuses about it. Mind you, I am not saying that patience should not be exerted by the person on the other end. But that is their call to make, not our right to demand. And I'm not saying anything that many of us have not said before. So, brothers and sisters, we could go on and on discussing patience, but I don't think any of us have the patience for that. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to benefit from this conversation. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives us our sins. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases us in patience, and that He makes our tests easy for us. I pray that He doesn't hold us to task too strictly for the times that we fail, and that He forgives us for the times that we fail. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to succeed, and to succeed often and quickly. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects us from doing wrong and from being wronged by others. Ameen, ameen, ameen. I'll open it up for questions, comments, concerns, anything in those categories. No question is off the table. Questions, comments, concerns.
I want to add a concern for you that you should know that there is also another controversy about, since we don't have to fight about when Ramadan started, we're now fighting about whether you say Ramadan Kareem because it's the law's name. People are now fighting about that.
Yeah, so what do we say? Do we say Ramadan Mubarak, Ramadan Kareem? Is that something that is encouraged?
The Imam talked about it last night.
Ramadan, No, sister,
We gotta fight about something.
See, that's exactly what I'm saying.
you know, at a certain point, some of these things really get,
Those things.
you start to wonder if, like, what it is that we are struggling with. And, you know, and it really comes down to identity, right? Like, we are really struggling over our identity and how to make our identity this perfect thing. But we are pulling from so many different places that we don't know what our identity is. It's really a struggle for identity. And we latch onto that thing that sounds the best, but can really confuse us. So I know Sheikh Anwar Imam Anas would definitely support you if you said Ramadan Kareem, right? You have no qualms, you have no issues there with that. If you say Happy Ramadan, if you say it in English as well, we will not kick you out, right? I think you're safe across the board, right?
I told her that I'll go further and say Allahu Akbar.
Anyone else? Questions?
To go along with Sister Saida, some people are neglecting salams and they just say Ramadan Mubarak to you and they never give salams. And if you give them, they don't return them because it's become such a, fad or whatever to acknowledge the month of Ramadan as opposed to the
basic
thing
thing.
that has priority, which is to give the salam.
Right. And you know, and in the context of patience, this is a very good point, right? In the context of patience, this here is something that, especially in this month, it is going to challenge us, right? So we give salams, the person doesn't return it, and then we leave upset with that person, right? To the point that we start losing some of the blessings that we got at the very beginning of it anyway, right? And this is the purpose of Ramadan, right? To test us with these very things that we hold dear and close to us. And this is not to say that a person should not do that, or the person should behave like that, but this really is, Ramadan is all about me and that mirror in front of me, right? And that there, although that person acts like that, that there is my mirror. That there is a thing that shows me my reflection, like, how did I respond to that? Did I start feeling negative feelings towards that person? Or did I say, you know what, alhamdulillah, maybe they didn't hear me? Or, and I know most likely, or alhamdulillah, maybe they didn't hear me. Or you know what, maybe they said it and I didn't hear it. Or maybe, it shows us our reflection, right? It shows us. And then if that's what they did, then you know what? MashaAllah, maybe they have a different understanding of this. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easier for them. Right? So all of these are responses that we can give that still allow us to give the best versions of ourselves in this Ramadan. But that is the test, right? That is the test. To continue to maintain the best version of yourself. Comments, questions?
I would ask that when you give examples of people that are undergoing trials, never forget the continent of Africa.
Yes.
And that our people have been, and when you talked about forbearance, you know, automatically my mind went to, how did we get here?
Yes.
I mean, I'm saying Africans born in America, how did we get here?
Absolutely.
That was a total situation of forbearance.
Yes. And still is, right?
But we should always bring that up instead of, so many places you go and you hear Syria this,
Right.
Pakistan that, and blah, blah. And we never hear about our people.
Right. No, absolutely, absolutely. And that was really an error on my part. So thank you for pointing that out, right? At Cuba, we always mention, the continent, we always mention our own plight here in the United States. Because forbearance is exactly what is happening right now. That we send our kids out and we are praying that they are safe. And we literally do not know if they will be safe returning home. Right? And this is a fact. So this year, we ourselves are navigating forbearance right now. This is it. Because the alternative is what we've seen others have done. Right? To get violent. This is forbearance. And we are navigating that right now. So very, very good point to bring us back to this is part of our reality right here. Other questions, comments, concerns? Goodness, the silence is killing me. Have patience. Yes, you're right. Have patience.
Is Sister Muslim about that? She don't have no questions this week?
Oh, yeah, messing with Sister Muslim. All right. If there is nothing else, I will leave us here. Again, pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us. We'll close off with Surah Al-Asr, inshallah. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا بالصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.